Do you like books? I mean, really, really like books? Then you're in the right place. Each week, your host, Sam Hankin, interviews the best of today's top-selling authors and the up-and-coming superstars of modern literature. This is The Avid Reader. Here is your host, Sam Hankin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Avid Reader, brought to you by my bookshop, Wellington Square Bookshop. Our guest today is Andy Clark, author of The Experience Machine: How Our Minds Predict and Shape Reality. It's published by Pantheon, which is a division of Penguin. It'll be released on May 2nd. Andy's professor of cognitive philosophy at the University of Sussex. As will become relevant, at least to me, he's also been the director of the cognitive science program at Indiana University in Bloomington, where my hero, Douglas Hofstadter, works. Andy is also the author of Surfing Uncertainty, Natural Born Cyborgs, and Being There. In addition, he's the editor, co-editor of many other works on cognitive science and the mind, including a volume on Alan Turing. So, The Experience Machine tells a story of an extended mind, a philosophical theory that challenges our traditional view of the mind as a self-contained entity located solely within the confines of an individual brain. So according to Andy, the mind is not just the product of the brain, but it's instead a kind of dynamic system that extends beyond the boundaries of the skull and into the external world. We synthesize sensory information and expectation. We predict our reality, and thus the seeming boundaries between us and it, the world, are illusory or at least blurred, and our perception of same may be nothing more than a controlled hallucination, harkening back to my interviews with David Chalmers and Philip Goff, but not with Michael Graziano, who got very mad at me. Whether we live in a shared or not shared hallucination, or a simulation, or a multiverse, or a solipsistic lonely place all by our little selves, they're concepts that are posited by many, and in talking to each other, talking to each of them that I've spoken to, there seems to be a certain kind of certainty of their theory in their own minds. But any intelligent and perceptive lay reader, and I pride myself on being perhaps one of those, is going to necessarily be confused. And for that matter, your own mind will be altered by the concepts promulgated and disseminated by and between these friends and colleagues as they strive to make some sense of this mess. So welcome, Andy, and thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, so I asked Geppetta, which is what I call ChatGPT, because I would prefer beauty over accuracy in this sense. So Geppetta is GPT. And now she's my best friend. So I asked her, I said to her, hey, and which is how I talked to her, hey, Geppetta. And then she goes, I'm not Geppetta, but I will answer the question. And I said, hey, what's the first thing that I should ask Andy today? And she says, the first question you should ask is, what do you think are the most significant implications of the theory of the extended mind for our understanding of human cognition? And how can this theory inform our approaches to education, technology, and the design of our physical and social environments?
Okay, thank you, Geppetta. Yeah, I think that the implications of the extended mind account are really for how we will sort of design and think about our wider environments. Because if you start to think that what just looks like part of your environment might actually be functioning very much as part of the machinery of your mind, then that gives us a different kind of respect for it. Perhaps it accrues different kinds of protections under law. So I think there are real social implications like that. For a theory of cognition, it asks that the theory of cognition should look at the brain as kind of part of a larger dynamical system, and it should constantly be asking, what's the brain doing moment by moment to kind of dovetail its activities to what the body and the world are making available. So I think seeing brains as a node in these larger machines is actually a very useful way of looking at actually ordinary brain science.
That's interesting, because you said something that does exactly what I suggested. And it begins to confuse me, because you said the brain is the heart of. And I go, okay, and then what is the heart?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a fan of the brain. That's the thing. Sometimes when people think about the extended mind story, they think, oh, maybe Andy thinks that brains don't really matter. You know, my partner's a cognitive neuroscientist. You know, I'm on board with brains being really, really, really important. I think what they do though is they orchestrate stuff. Brains are basically action controllers and information foragers, and it's that information foraging role that I think we've maybe paid too little attention to. Brains are really, really good at estimating where the good information is in the environment and taking the actions that get that information back at the right time.
Well, if we go back to the first question that my friend posed, suppose I'm just really dumb and I'm going, oh, I got to interview this guy today. I have no idea what to ask him. I know, ask Geppetta. She tells me what to ask and seems, oh, okay, that seems like a great question. So that goes back to your two people going to the museum in the morning. One of them knows she's going and she knows where it is without relying on anything else. The other one has the beginnings of Alzheimer's. So he has it written down on a piece of paper, which you posit is a portion of his mind in this instant. So they're each using their minds, but one needs, I don't want to say a crutch, but some assistance. So that's a pretty good example. And you yourself use it to begin your book.
Yes, that's right. So, you know, I think that under the right circumstances, something as simple as a notebook, as passive looking as a notebook, can actually be acting as part of the machinery of the mind. The reason for that ultimately is that brains don't care where information is stored. What they care about is what information is available and how to get at it. So an example I sometimes use is, if I ask you what month is this, you'll answer, oh, it's the month of April. And you count as actually having known that before I asked you the question. But if you think about it, you weren't going around rehearsing, oh, it's April, it's April, it's April all the time. It wasn't part of your conscious experience at that moment. Your brain just kind of knew it was there, knew how to get at it when it needed it, and up it came. And the basic line of the extended mind is, it doesn't really matter where information is stored. It's robust access and trusted access that makes something count as part of the sort of ecosystem of cognition that is you.
So, okay, that sends me off on another tangent. So like, if you look at panpsychism, which you, in one of your interviews, said you kind of look at it as a last resort. And then, but if you talk to Philip Goff, and you guys have probably talked at seminars and with each other, like you hang out with David and write with David. But okay, so what am I supposed to do? I read both of these books. I read lots of these books. I interview lots of these people, and you don't all agree on everything.
Yeah, I think it's surprising how much we do agree on. If you like.
Okay.
So the disagreements that we're looking at there are about this very, very, very elusive thing, consciousness, conscious experience. Dave Chalmers and Philip Goff probably both think that conscious experience is somehow constructed by what the brain is doing, even though we don't yet understand how that construction is happening. And maybe panpsychism is necessary to get the right juice out for Goff, and who knows, something else, or maybe some informational version of panpsychism is what it takes to get the juice out for Dave. I don't believe that there's any juice there to get out, so you know, I belong to a different kind of camp altogether, the so-called illusionists, not a word I like, but there it is, we got lumbered with it. People who think that actually we're prone to a certain kind of illusion that there's something very special going on inside our own minds, when really we're just, you know, responding to inputs and creating our own model of the world. And within that model, I depict myself as having all these rich and interesting experiences, and that's kind of what it is to have one. But then you don't ask the extra question, you know, where does that extra sort of juice come from that makes the experience just the way it is? Instead, you just stick with, and here are the things I say, and here are the things I do, and here are the patterns in my behavior, and this is how what's going on in my brain and body explains those patterns. And then the only remaining question, this is the illusionist stance, not many people believe it, so you know, I'm just floating it out here, is Why are we so prone to that illusion? You know, what is it about the way that we're built that makes it seem to us as if consciousness is something so difficult that maybe science will never be able to get to grips with it, or we need to invent a new kind of science, a kind of panpsychism science or whatever. So that's sort of, it's replacing the hard problem with the meta hard problem. Why do we think there's a hard problem at all?
Ooh, that's what I asked David. Okay. He does think there's a hard problem. In fact, he's the master of the hard problem. And the idea is, okay, the easy problems, yeah, we can actually kind of figure out. The hard problem is what all of you are attempting to solve. But you just said a hard problem might not even be there at all.
Yeah, so I'm not attempting to solve that one, you see. That's I got let off that hook by being one of these weird little illusionist kind of folks. So, you know, Keith Frankish, me, Dan Dennett, we're probably all one way or another in this illusionist camp. Possibly Graziano, who you mentioned earlier, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because I do this because, like many of what things that you guys do, I can't disprove anything that you posit, nor can you prove it.
Exactly.
So I always say, what about solipsism? In which case, only one of us is here. And if it was a solipsistic universe, would my actions change in the slightest? And whenever I've asked it, well, Graziano got angry at me, but the rest of everybody was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's possible, but let's just leave that. It's like when I asked Frank Wilczek, who invented positive time crystals and won the Nobel Prize. I said, one was a prime number for a while. It seems like one should be a prime number because it's divisible by itself, which is its essence, and it's divisible by one. And he gave a great answer. He goes, it wouldn't be convenient.
Yes, well, I like that answer. I think it would be very inconvenient if the hard problem was the problem that Chalmers and Goff think that it is, because if it was, then currently we haven't a clue about the solution. And I'm simply trying to be more optimistic, but maybe that's just maybe it's just turning a blind eye to the real sort of evidence you have from within. See, this is what Dave will always say to me. It's like, you've got the evidence that you need that the hard problem is real because there it is within. And then I have to say, so what would it be like from within if there wasn't a hard problem, but I just thought there was, and I just produced all these behaviors and actions that I'm producing? Dave says, well, you'd be a zombie then. There'd be nothing it's like to be you. I say, well, maybe this is what it's like to be a zombie of your kind. So, we do go around in circles. I don't know what it takes to break the sort of deadlock here. My guess is that it's going to be something very practical. So I think that what's going to happen over the next sort of 15 to maybe 50 years is we'll learn how to intervene on this kind of experience machine that we've got in our heads, that lets us reach out and grab bits of the world and use them for cognitive ends in an extended mindy way. And we'll learn how to reach in and alter things so that we deal better with conditions like autism spectrum condition, PTSD. We'll learn why we're so prone to certain kinds of bias and illusion. We'll be able to sculpt our actions and responses in new and more powerful ways. And the more we can reach in and control the sort of phenomenology, if you like, the more I think we'll start to think, well, the science we've got is the answer. That's it. We know what phenomenology is because we can intervene on it. We can reach in, poke it, prod it, control it. If you can do all of that with standard science, then I think we'll just start to think, well, that's it. We've explained it. The illusion that there's something we haven't explained will slowly go away. So that's my optimistic spin on it. Increasing control will be the answer.
Yeah, and that's the one way in which your book is completely different. It's almost a DIY. It's almost a do-it-yourself manual on how you can self-correct the errors that occur, and thus actually help society by understanding that this is really what's going on. For example, simple ones like your angry Jack one, or this idea of the shooters, like cops who shoot people because they misperceive a cell phone as a gun. those types of things are actually practical knowledge that somehow through sociology or medication could actually be modified by what you posit, correct?
Yes, I think, take the least, in a way, the easiest to deal with example there, the neutral face looks angry kind of face. So lots of experiments now showing that interoception, the inward-looking sense of our own bodily state, is playing quite a big role in how we perceive the world around us. So much of a role that if you show someone what would normally be a neutral face, but you give them false cardiac feedback, making their brain think their heart is beating quicker than it is, then that neutral face is perceived as a slightly angry or worrying face. That's the same effect that Lisa Feldman Barrett thought might be at work in some of these kind of cell phone mistaken for gun tragic incidents. All that sort of fearful interoception in the dark alley, along with all these societal stereotypes and prejudices, could combine to lead you to predict that the most likely object that is going to be there is a gun. And then when you actually get sort of slightly noisy visual information coming in, that could actually turn that noisy information into a clear percept of a gun. So the idea would be, it's not that you kind of see something fuzzy and then you sort of mistakenly infer that maybe it's a gun. Maybe when you chuck all this interoception and prejudice and biased expectations into the pot, you actually get a pretty clear seeing of a gun out of that. And as you say, there are recipes for action here. There are already programs trying to train police officers to interocept their own bodily states better, in the hope that that will avoid some of those sorts of errors, as well as training in sort of kind of video game type environments where you have to act quickly, and if you can begin to somehow control those rapid actions in that environment, that can give you just that little bit of wiggle room to attend a little bit more, and attention can really change how the predictive brain processes information. That's one of the main lines in the book, really.
Yeah, and I'm jumping around a bit, but if you go back to the beginning, the first preface, I guess, is when you're talking about you're giving a talk, you're jittery, you're nervous, and you feel the vibration in your pocket that you assume is your phone, and then you realize, oh no, I put my phone under the podium. So what's this? So you can explain that phenomenon, which I haven't really experienced. And then if you go to this do-it-yourself self-help type thing, okay, this is just something that happens. It's qualitatively analyzed and understood. So I guess for someone, I just talk about things no one knows about in the book because I haven't read it. Why does this happen? What is it? And okay, then the next step is, how could you correct it? Not that it's important, but how could you?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that you don't get phantom phone vibrations. They are so prevalent. Nearly everyone I've spoken to says, "Oh yeah, I get that." But yeah, not everybody does. For me, they are incredibly powerful. It's sort of like, how could that not be a phone vibrating in my pocket? That particular feeling. And I now get these phantom vibrations even on my wrist, because I gave in and started wearing a smartwatch. So now I'm getting phantom pings all over the place. The idea is that, or I guess the account here is that it's a sort of chronic prediction of the likelihood of your phone buzzing you that is constantly at work, allowing your brain to settle on what's really just a small, ordinary perturbation of bodily state, the fluctuations our bodies produce all the time, and then sort of amplifying it, or just treating counter evidence as noise because of that strong prediction. So you become a kind of chronic vibration haver, just like some people have chronic pain, and there might actually be quite similar mechanisms at work in chronic pain and stuff like phantom phone vibration. What can you do about it? That was the other half of your question there. In the case of the phantom phone vibration, there really isn't much that you can do about it, because your expectations are unconscious, as it were. It's not that you're consciously going around expecting your phone to be buzzing you. You have all these unconscious expectations because you've had a lot of experience of your phone buzzing you, often at inconvenient moments. It's known that it's exacerbated by caffeine and stress. And that was clearly the situation in the little anecdote that I was offering in the book there, because I was about to go in front of a big crowd and I was rather stressed, as you do. So yeah, in terms of intervention, the main thing that you can do for many of the cases is try to get people to reframe their own experiences or sensations in ways that can push back against ingrained predictions. This is good for something like chronic pain. There should be a way of pushing back for the phantom phone. Now you mention it, I never thought about this, to be honest. It's like, it doesn't seem important enough to worry about how to get rid of it. But really and truly, there should be a way. Presumably I would just have to somehow stop my brain having the expectation that my phone is very likely to buzz me, especially at inconvenient and stressful moments. I don't know quite how to do that.
Well, maybe, I wonder if you could put a fake phone, like one of those joy buzzers, just put it in your pocket and it would go off randomly, but it wasn't your phone, and you would realize, oh no, this isn't my phone. So I wonder if that would modify the behavior. But that's neither here nor there.
Or maybe just changing. Here's another thought, just off the top of my head, is change the way that it's buzzing you, change the frequency of the buzz or something like that, so that I'm no longer getting a sort of a reinforcement signal, if you like, for the buzz that my brain was predicting before. So I start to make it predict a different one, and then I switch back to the old one, and I ought to have at least a period of grace. So there's a little experiment there that we could do. Period of grace, and as you get used to it again, you start to predict it again, then you get the phantoms again. So you get temporary relief from phantoms.
Period of grace. So yeah, if you and your buddies get together, it'll be called POG. It'll be a new acronym. But okay, we approach it the other way. Here's something I don't know how you could do anything about. Well, first of all, you do the Ponzo illusion, and then you do Wittgenstein's duck rabbit. But okay, these are things that we kind of know. But this is in 2015. You have the dress, and I'm a gold and white person. Which I think, did you say you're a gold and white?
Me too. Yeah.
We're smarter.
We're right, whatever they say.
So that's not something like the phantom phone. That's something completely different. And explain how that's based on a perception of lighting conditions and what you're supposed to do about that, or is it even important? Because it could be important.
Yeah, the dress is a very interesting case, because what the vision scientists said immediately when that came out was it's about your assumptions about where the light is coming from. If you assume that the light is coming from one direction, mostly from above, then you're going to see it as sort of white and gold. If you assume that the light is coming in a sort of more ambient kind of way, then I think you're going to see it as a sort of bluey dress. And that seems to be correct as far as it goes. But what a follow-up study from some people at NYU, it was Pascal Wallisch and colleagues, this was published in a really good journal, Vision Science. What they showed is that those differences line up with whether people are larks or owls, whether people tend to be people that get up in the morning, see a lot of things in morning light, or whether they're people that do, real night owls, spend an awful lot of time out in late night bars and so on, see a lot of things in artificial light. Turns out that the larks tend to see it as gold and white, and the owls tend to see it as blue. It's not 100% correlation. It might turn out that you're actually a night owl, a sort of barfly of some kind, but nonetheless, for some reason, you're seeing it the other way. For some reason in your life experience, your brain has just started to predict light coming in the way it normally comes if you're outside. But as a sort of statistical tendency, it's a strong one. And I think what that shows is how our idiosyncratic life experiences that lead us to predict the sensory inputs in a certain kind of way might really be structuring our experience in ways where there are big differences between people, most of which we just don't notice until something like that experiment starts, or that meme anyway, starts to bring out. So, one of my colleagues here, Anil Seth, is conducting something called the perception census at the moment. And the idea of that is to try to get some scientific evidence about variation in individual experience that might be flying under the radar. If the predictive brain stuff is right, there's probably a lot of variation because experience reflects history as much as it reflects anything else.
The interesting thing about the dress is it's the only thing I can remember in my lifetime where everyone was so certain. And you would say to the other person, what the hell is wrong with you? It's obviously this. And that seldom happens. And then the other person would say, I don't understand how you can even begin to look at that and see those colors. It's one, to me, it was unique. And that's why it was viral.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. It's really unusual in that respect. One of the other ones that is a bit like that, I think, is this green needle brainstorm. You've probably seen this one with some points, green needle, points, brainstorm, whatever, and it's the very same sound file, and according to which word they're pointing at, you really hear it very, very differently. That's another case where I think it's quite striking, although not quite as strong as the dress.
Well, it's kind of like oh yeah, I should mention that the appendix, which I have approved, so the page, it's not numbered, it's just 000. But the appendix is excellent because it's, yes, they are notes to sources, but a lot of it is just like David Foster Wallace or Douglas Hofstadter might just say, okay, I didn't have room for this in the book, but I really feel like this. I might just stick this in here, which I really like because it's fun to read the notes as much as it is to read the books. But the other way you could approach it, and this is the third way, is that, you have illustrations, which I was getting off on, the illustrations of what appears to be nonsense or noise. And then you go, turn the page. And then you turn the page and you see a cat crouching. Then you turn the page back and you can never not see the cat crouching again. And that's something different completely.
Yeah, well, I think it's the same mechanism that's at work there, which is that once your brain starts to be able to make a certain kind of prediction that brings structure and meaning to the scene in front of you, you just can't go back from that, because a prediction like that is somehow very satisfying. That's not a very scientific thought, but it just seems very satisfying. Maybe the brain's just going to hang on to that because now you're really making sense of something. Surely that's what brains want to do. So it's a bit like that question, what did your native language sound like before you learnt to speak it? What did a sentence in your native language sound like then when you heard it without knowing the language? Well, we can't know that anymore, but we can approximate it using demonstrations like the sine wave speech ones that I mention in the book, where you're showing a sound file, you hear a sound file, and then you hear the original sentence, and then you hear the sound file again. The original sound file was very sort of dynamically odd. A lot of the notes had been stripped out, a lot of the information wasn't there, there was a kind of skeleton. But once you've heard the right one, that skeleton now sounds very, very meaningful. You can hear what's being said, and over time you can become a native speaker of sine wave speech, as that phenomenon's called, and then you don't even need to hear the original anymore, just like I can hear novel sentences in my native language. So I think there are lots and lots of demos, and what they all show, really, the phantom phone vibration as well as the others, so the bodily ones too, is just that prediction is a big but variable bit of the machine that generates experience. So it's not just the sensory input. Prediction is playing a big role, but crucially for the book, or for this account, so my publishers don't like me to say story because it doesn't sound confident and scientific enough. I should say account. Anyway, this account, a big bit of this account is the variability of the weighting on prediction versus sensory evidence, because the brain varies that according to its own guess about which is more reliable. And because that variability is there, the wiggle room becomes even greater.
If you take that and go backwards to what all the reviews have said, and what that article back in 2018 in the New Yorker, which was an excellent article, where people are going to say, how is he saying this? How is my notebook or my smartphone actually, and does he really mean this? An
Yes.
extension of my brain. Extension of my brain or my, no, it's not a duality, an extension of my mind. How is this now, how has this become a part of my mind? And then they're going to go, wait a minute, is that consciousness? There's so many things that pop up, right?
Yeah. I mean, so the right way to say it, as far as the extended mind story goes, is it becomes part of the underlying machinery of your mind. That's how we want to say it. Me and Dave Chalmers, actually, he was one of the co-authors of the extended mind account. And I agree that it is an unintuitive way of carving the cake. So I think there's another question here, which is, why are we so driven normally to think that the mind is kind of in here, in the head? What's going on that is sort of making us have what, from the perspective of the account that Dave and I gave, is a kind of illusion, because we don't think mind really is in there. So why are we having this illusion it's in there? And I think that's because we project ourselves to wherever perception and action seem to be meeting. And so whenever we kind of find ourselves closed in a perception action loop in a particular part of the universe, we tend to project ourselves there and say, that's where I am. But Dan Dennett, years ago, gave us a lovely little philosophical short story called Where Am I? That I think already undermines that sort of inference, if you like. So in Where Am I, there was somebody whose brain was being stored somewhere in a laboratory, and it was in wireless contact with the body that was being sent into a radioactive area or something like that, or a dangerous area. And so as long as the bandwidth was good and the brain was in good contact with the body, the person thought, oh, I'm there, this is where I am, I'm here, walking around the radioactive zone or whatever. But then if something goes wrong with the bandwidth, they suddenly start thinking, oh my god, I'm trapped in a brain, I'm just a brain in a cliff top. So their perspective kind of on themselves kind of shifts. So I think there's just an inference that we make about where we are, and it can sometimes, or where the machinery of mind is, and it can sometimes mislead. Think about the Dennett short story, you can see how that could happen, and Dave and I think that sometimes that happens when we're so confident that it's all going on in the head, when in fact some of it's going on in the smartphone or the notebook or wherever else.
I like when how you wrote together, they decided your name would go first because you were more certain.
Yes, that's right. The authors are listed in order of belief in the central thesis or something like that. Yeah, Dave wrote that, as you can tell.
Yeah. Well, he also wrote that. I like the other thing he wrote about you is like, basically on an everyday basis, you're just a regular guy. It's kind of wacky, but you're a regular guy. But then when you go dancing, it's like, oh, this is such a joyous, perfect person, you know?
Oh yes, that was a very sweet comment. Yes,
He's
yeah.
he
No,
really,
I mean it is true that I think I have a stronger degree of belief in the central thesis of the paper than Dave does, and even my degree of belief is probably only about 80%. I would say something like that. It is unintuitive, but I think that a very, very good comparison is with a prosthetic limb. So if you think about someone with a prosthetic limb, a very well fitted prosthetic, how it enables them to do the right kinds of thing in the environment, I think the right thing to say is that person includes the abilities of the prosthetic limb. There's something, I think, morally and ethically wrong with kind of shrinking the person somehow to just what the unaided physical body there could do. And I think there'd also be something wrong in shrinking the person to just what the unaided brain can do. I think we would miss an awful lot of what we think is most important about ourselves then. And it becomes dramatized if you look at cases where people do have mild dementia and use something like a web of electronic trails or a smartphone to kind of shore up their behavior or their abilities in different ways. Well, I think we should give those bits of machinery and equipment their due and say they're enabling the machinery of that person to now be a bit bigger and a bit more robust in certain circumstances than it otherwise would be. So for me, the deal breaker is the ethical line on what is otherwise, I think, a kind of, I can see why, but I can also see lots of reasons why not situation.
well, that's a very practical explanation of what the extension of mind does. Another example that you give, which is coming at it from the other way, is the construction worker who falls from a height through the plank. He is in excruciating pain because he feels that a nail has pierced his foot completely, when in actuality, like in those carnival shows where they put out a rubber limb and hit it with a sledgehammer, and you feel it in your arm simply because your arm is next to it. And this, it turns out the nail didn't even go through his foot at all. It went between his toes. That's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, well, remember, you know, there's a delicate balancing act that I'm trying to perform in the book called The Experience Machine, which is to tell what is very much a kind of brain-centered story about the construction of our moment-by-moment experiences, like that experience of pain, and to bring that into harmony with the extended mind story, which isn't particularly about conscious experiences. It's about what counts as the machinery of mind, going back to that, you know, month of April example earlier on. So the trick there is that predictive brains estimate all the time their own certainty and uncertainty, and they estimate how that certainty and uncertainty would be altered or particularly reduced, because that's what they care about, by acting in the world to retrieve the right information at the right time. And so predictive brains that are uncertainty minimizers of that kind will automatically rope in stuff from the external world. They're information foragers. So that's how you get the extended mind out of the predictive brain. And then you turn back to thinking about the construction of experience, and then it's much more a sort of brain and very local action centered story. So in the construction worker's case, you got this very strong visual evidence. The brain becomes very confident that something pretty terrible has happened to the body, because you can see this big nail going through the boot. Generates extreme feelings of pain. They have to give the person fentanyl, and then, as you pointed out, you know, when they take the boot off, the nail had passed between the toes. It's not that different to the situation where you go to the dentist expecting to feel an awful lot of pain, and if that's your expectation, versus somebody that really believes the dentist when they say this will just be a tickle, well, that alters experience. If you really believe the dentist when they say this will just be a tickle, it feels a little bit less painful, and a lot of controlled experiments showing this, feels a little bit less painful than it would otherwise. And then you get a sort of a virtuous circle, because now you've got evidence that it's not that bad going to the dentist after all. And so the next time they tell you it's just going to tickle a little bit, you believe it even more. And so this is a kind of good virtuous circle. And then we get the sort of vicious circles as well, when we expect to feel great pain in certain circumstances, and we get into that circumstance, the expectation helps bring about some of the pain, and that confirms the false expectation. So the thing about predictive brains is they're going to lock us into good and bad circles as they generate experience. I think that's one of the big messages of the book. Watch out for these circles, or, you know, use them to your advantage when you can, and watch out for them when they're out to get you.
The other side of that coin is that dentists in America, at least, statistically have a higher rate of suicide than other professions. And I've always thought in my mind, that's because no one ever wants to come see them, and because of the pain that they inflict. I don't know if that's true, but it definitely is statistics, which do lie. Yeah. But in any event, so a couple of moments ago, you mentioned the word loop, which brings me to Douglas and I Am a Strange Loop, which David Chalmers discussed at length. And some of what you're saying harkens back to that, but I don't know. Yeah. I am not smart enough to know whether or not you agree with what Douglas Hofstadter is saying in I Am a Strange Loop.
Yeah. I think I have to be honest here. It's too long since I read I Am a Strange Loop, and I probably didn't read it quite closely enough at the time to know whether I agree or don't agree with the argument. The idea that goes back to a lot of Hofstadter's work, all the way back to Gödel, Escher, Bach, you know, this idea that that human identity is very much constructed through these kinds of these kinds of what I would think of as sort of predictive loops, where we expect certain things to happen because we depict ourselves to ourselves in a certain kind of way. So it's this sort of power of depicting yourself to yourself is perhaps part of what generates a sense of sort of confusing self-awareness that we humans seem to have. You know, we're not just aware of our surroundings, we're kind of aware that we're aware of our surroundings, and there's this sort of thought, and I think it's there in Graziano too to some extent, that it's that model of ourselves that we bring to bear as we engage our worlds that is somehow giving us a sense of conscious experience, a sense of identity that is so much a part of our phenomenology. So I think to that extent, you know, the stuff that Hofstadter and you know, the stuff in the book of various contributions, what was that called? The Mind's Eye, that book that was Dennett and Hofstadter book. So lots and lots of things in there that seem to be pursuing the kind of the stuff that happens to minds like ours just because we're able to engage in all of these sorts of complex self-reflective exercises. You know, a question that I've asked for a long time is, what's the role of language in all of this? I can't help but thinking it's because we humans command language that we've turned our own self-images and thoughts into objects, and we can get into these spirals of reflection, which I think I'm getting into one now, so I better stop.
Well, yeah, and then we can go back to Douglas and a book in which he deals with translations of a simple doggerel French poem. But
that's a beautiful book. Yes,
I love that book, and so does David. It's just lovely. There's so many. And then he translated, I guess it was Eugene, one of the Russian. He translated the book without reading the book. He read the translations and then created his own version of the book using the other translations. But going back to this pilgrimage to Bloomington, it's like, so David says he wrote a letter, or he was sick of math. He writes a letter. Douglas says, hey, come on over and hang out. So how did you get there?
How did I get there? Yeah, that's a good question. I got there because I had been working in at the philosophy, neuroscience, psychology program in St. Louis for quite a long time, Washington University in St. Louis. And then I took a job back at the University of Sussex in the UK because I was a little bit homesick, but it so wasn't working out. Honestly, it wasn't working out. I won't go into details. And I just wanted to go back to the USA. I knew some people out at Bloomington, Indiana, Rob Goldstone in particular, but other people too. And they just said, hey, we're going to be looking for a director for our CogSci program soon because Richard Schifrin wants to step down from that role. So that was my way into Bloomington, Indiana, where I had a very, very nice time and did get to meet Douglas Hofstadter once or twice. Yeah, not as often as I would have liked to, but yeah. And that's of course at that point, just to tie those threads together, is we managed to hire a certain David Chalmers back in the PMP program as our first postdoctoral fellow, when actually he just published something on connectionism and artificial neural networks, and I didn't know he was working on consciousness. This was like a bit of a surprise to me when he rocked up and said, oh, I'm working on consciousness almost exclusively now. I thought, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, that was back when he looked like a young Jimmy Page or something.
Exactly, beautiful. Loved that haircut. Or the hair, maybe. It wasn't the cut.
He's like me. I had the same hair, and then this is what happened.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Another way of looking at things is, again, like you were talking about the books back here. You talk about when you were in University of Washington in St. Louis, and your friend upstairs from you studied Alzheimer's, and then the gentleman who she visited, she's wondering, how is he able to cope so well given his situation? And you talked about he has these cueing mechanisms within this safe room that allow him to do so. And then I thought, wait a minute, let me do my own thought experiment. What if Andy's made this person up? She doesn't exist. I'm not going to go to St. Louis to verify that she exists or that she does these things. So then I thought, okay, there's nothing, I suspend my disbelief when I read this book, and that person exists in my mind, and she did what you say she did. But doesn't it undermine a lot of what you're writing about, or what any of you guys are writing about? Because I have to rely on you to accept the theory that you're positing. I have to rely on you telling me your truth. Then I'm still relying on this part of you to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be suspicious, but I don't know if you should be quite that suspicious. I mean, you can go and check that there's a Caroline Baum that was director of occupational therapy at the right time at Washington University in St. Louis, that she published papers about people in the inner city with Alzheimer's who were scoring really badly on the standard test but living very successful or reasonably successful lives. And she asked, how come? And then it turned out that their homes were very, very highly structured, their routines were structured. And the way that, of course, that fits with the extended mind is now the home is kind of part of the machinery that's holding them in place. Take them out of there and it's like inflicting unwanted brain damage on them. But yeah, I mean, I guess when we read anything, we do have to take some stuff on trust. And you're right that nobody can check everything. Nobody's got time to do that. So we do live in an ecosystem where one of the achievements of humanity up to a point has been to kind of have a collective sense of who we can trust and who we can't. And sadly, I feel that the last 20 years have made that a much harder thing than it used to be.
And with AI, it'll become even harder because there will be a manufactured reality, whether it's deep fake or the pictures created of movie stars out of thousands of other pictures. But you're completely wrong, because look at America now, and you don't want to come back here now. You have Trump, and I saw a picture of him the other day with all these people around him smiling and screaming and agreeing with everything he said, when he's still clearly, to me, lying or wrong about everything, with 1,000-word vocabulary, an intelligence equivalent to a fifth grader, if that. But I know that for certain. But then again, as my brother always said, I said, how can this happen, Bob? Because he says, because half the people in America believe one thing and half the people believe something else. And who am I to say they're wrong, because they're going to say exactly the same thing to me? Why am I their boss?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that there's a very tricky situation. I think you're being far too kind to Trump, to be honest.
I have to be here, but no, I can't stay.
I know we dare not. Let's not go there. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that is most striking from the sort of experience machine perspective is that if you have strong enough predictions, it does so much kind of sculpt the way that you experience what ought to be neutral evidence. And so I think there is an issue here about how do we get our hands on proper kinds of evidence, given that our own predictions and expectations are constantly playing a role in how we see things, how we engage with things, particularly how we forage for new information. And so, predictive brains being great information foragers, but they look for the information in the places they expect to find it. And if you expect that the only place you're going to find the good information is in, I don't know, some mad right-wing website called, I don't know, Trump is God or something, then that's where you go looking for the good information. So this will be one of these nasty little cycles. And this is where I think we actually need to reinvent epistemology. So, epistemology, the kind of systematic philosophical study of knowledge and the conditions under which knowledge is possible. I reckon something like this, but with an eye on the sort of information age, digital age, if you like, should be taught from primary school onwards, from like little children onwards.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that in America and DeSantis in Florida. But it's, I think a lot of this is born of fear. And then you go back to, are people good? Are people evil? And then you have to decide, wait a minute, is that even something I can discuss? Is that even something that exists? This concept of nature, nurture, determining if somebody is good or not good. And who are we to say? I mean, I had a friend who learned to read the Bible in Greek. He was incredibly intelligent. When he exercised, he could lower his blood pressure just by thinking about it. And he believed that the earth was created 6,000 years ago and that God placed the fossils there as a test of our faith. And one day I said to him, Chris, how can you be so stupid? And he looked at me and he goes, how can you be so stupid?
Yeah.
Much ends it.
Yeah, and you know, if you've got high enough subjective probability on certain things, then what looks to other people just like good evidence against them just isn't good evidence against them for you, starting from the place that you started from. And so, you know, I was on a podcast yesterday actually, and it was something like a philosopher and a pastor go into a bar or something. It was called. I think that's the name of it. Anyway, there was a pastor involved in this, and they were talking a little bit about Bayesian accounts of religious belief and how you can sort of, you know, where Bayesian stories or accounts are the ones that kind of underpin the predictive brain. It's like, you know, what's the good of being a predictive brain? The good, the value, is that you get to use what you know to determine how you deal with new evidence. You know, so stored knowledge makes a difference to how you deal with new evidence. In our case here, sensory evidence, but any kind of evidence. And so, yeah, you know, stack the subjective probabilities high enough in, as it were, the wrong direction, and good evidence just won't be able to make a ripple on the pond of your belief. So yeah, I think it's hard to. All we can do is assume that people don't really start in such a bad place as that, and that what has happened is that over the course of an education, when they were young, in their families and so on, subjective probabilities of that kind have just built up and up. And so I think the only cure is the education system again. It's all that, you know.
99.9% of American population doesn't know what the word epistemological means. But the other thing, I just interviewed a guy he wrote a novel, not a novel, he wrote a book about people who believe really weird things, like the Flat Earth Society people. You can give them any evidence you want. Or those who believe that we never landed on the moon. It's a conspiracy involving 300,000 people. And yet they believe it 100%, which seems to belie, almost as if you guys are all in ivory towers, it seems to belie the idea that, okay, yes, this is what your mind does, and it is able to assimilate and utilize this outside stuff to create an extended mind. But then what about people who are just dead wrong? And you and I know they're dead wrong, but there's thousands of people that think we're dead wrong. That goes almost back to this solipsistic type thing.
Yeah,
they know that we're wrong.
Yeah.
Epistemologically, they know we're wrong.
Well, they think we're wrong. You know, epistemology has room for truth. You know, they can be there. There's more than just confidence in there. But you know, what you want is confidence for good reasons. And I think we just need to teach ourselves what good reasons look like as a society. I think we've begun to lose sight of it. We're too attracted by sound bites and confidence, and not attracted enough by something like actually good arguments. You know, we can give an account of conspiracy theories. There's a beautiful accounts that show how brains that love to minimize prediction errors are actually going to be rather good hosts for conspiracy theories, because hey, when you get a good conspiracy theory going, you can minimize uncertainty across so many different domains. Everything begins to fall into place. So in a way, it's another one of the kind of weak spots of being prediction machines, is that we're going to be so happy when we can get rid of persistent errors and uncertainties that conspiracy theories will be attractive to us.
I'll give you a perfect example. I do not believe that there is a scintilla of evidence that a plane hit the Pentagon. I will never believe that a plane hit the Pentagon. It's like Occam's razor. I look at everything. There's absolutely no evidence. There's no wings. The grass isn't burnt. Nothing's knocked down. Every single camera. It's the Pentagon, the most surveilled building in the world. There's not one image of a plane hitting. The grass is not scorched. You have someone who doesn't know how to fly a plane flying at 600 miles an hour, making a 90-degree turn and hitting the building 6 feet above the ground.
Yeah, I agree.
Straightforward to me, but
Yep.
you may believe the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, bonkers. What can you, to use a technical term, what, what can you say? I mean, the thing is that.
Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm not looking at this logically? I don't mean to paint you in a corner, but I love painting you in a corner. I mean, because you are in a corner now. I believe this. I believe this because I've used my mind as an experience machine, and I've extended my brain to all what I consider empirical evidence that something did or did not occur.
And that sounds right to me.
This goes beyond what you're talking about, in my opinion.
Well, it does, because it requires us to take a stance on good ways of assessing evidence and good sources of evidence and all of the stuff that epistemology is about. There are multiple different ways of doing epistemology, if you like, that would be consistent with the broad principles of brains as prediction machines, extended minds, all the rest of it. So, this is a case where I just want to pass the buck to my epistemologist colleagues and say, we do have standards of evidence. If we can systematize them properly and get them through to the kids in school and organize our own infrastructures in ways that make it a little bit harder for the kind of the things that don't meet those standards to get equal platforms with the things that do, then we'll actually be giving ourselves a better chance of getting a little bit closer to the truth when we examine what presents itself to us as evidence. But you always have to. This is what predictive brains are doing all the time: is estimating whether the evidence is good or not. And this is what Trump did so cleverly with the whole notion there of fake news. It's like as soon as you can destabilize anything by just pointing the fake news finger at it, then you're really messing with us at a very fundamental level.
When you talk about you and your colleagues are like you're it's a trigger point for them perhaps, or a trigger point for you. It goes to, I'm thinking of this, and now that I've done this with 7 to 10 different people, I've decided to call you guys the Guild of Cognitive Science. It's like you almost are a guild. But the question is, you're all experts in what you do, but as I said at the outset, where does that leave me? So after we end today, I'm thinking, oh yeah, Andy made this very clear and I understand completely. But the next person I interview, yes, I respect Andy very much and he's a good friend of mine. But here's where we disagree.
Well, as long as they're going to present evidence for that disagreement, and the evidence is actually not absolutely bonkers evidence, so there are judgment calls to be made there. But we engage on these matters. People do change their minds. Philosophers don't change their minds that often, I think, but that's because they're dealing at such levels of abstraction that it's far too easy to sort of shore the edifice up somehow. So I agree that there's something tricky when different people have what look to be diametrically opposing views, and yet they seem to be using good evidence, they seem to be marshalling the evidence quite well. I guess in those situations I would be looking for a kind of common ground, some sort of idea that, well, maybe these views aren't as inconsistent as they look. So, somebody that is actually a panpsychist might not hold a view that is really inconsistent with my view of how the experience machine in our head generates experience, or maybe they do. But I feel like it depends on the panpsychist. You can probe them a bit. Maybe they think, okay, this is just getting rid of this hard problem bit, but everything else works just the way that you think it works. So we're going to do the science just the way that you think it ought to be done. This is a question I often ask panpsychists. Would it make a difference to how the science goes? And you get different answers. So So maybe there are disagreements where the right solution is maybe there's a meta story where everyone's got you know, a little bit of the elephant or whatever that thing is, you know, all the blind people with the elephant.
Well, I think it's the fact that you guys engage in civil discourse, which no longer exists in America. I think civil discourse always leads to progress, because once you listen to the other side, you obviously are gaining knowledge, and listening is the most important thing there could possibly be. Which brings me back to, yeah, actually, seeing and hearing. Which brings me back to, and it's a good place to close out, because as a bookseller, covers. Hey, do you have the book there you can hold up? I just have the proof.
I do. I got two editions. I got the UK and the USA,
Oh, cool.
and they got very different covers. I find that quite interesting. Let me see if I can. Can I reach my one without coming unstuck? Hang on.
Take your time.
It's gonna be fun. There you go. I got it. Right. Here we go. Here is the USA. Very nice yellow cover, nice and poppy. Here is the UK one, where obviously saw, wow. You know, yeah, they're both nice covers, I think. You know, I see this one as a kind of airport bookshop cover, and this one as a kind of, I don't know, sit down in the coffee shop with a kind of reading circle cover. I don't know, but they're both nice.
I mean, publishers are smart to put covers on the books because they should never let authors do it because they want to sell the books. But I always wonder how they choose the difference between the UK and here. But I like both of them. I think I like the UK one better. But this one is really cool because of the blur.
That's it. It's very I like that one, you know, because I like the big punchy sort of yellow and pink. They're kind of favorite colors of mine. So yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, the cover is really important because the cliche is what the cliche is. But everyone who comes in, that's how, unless they know exactly what they want to buy, they come in and they're going to buy the book that has the nicest cover. That's it.
Oh, there you go. Cool.
No two ways about it. The second thing, as a bookseller and many of my readers, is the epigraph. And in your epigraph, and you use it from Narnia, one of my favorite authors too, C.S. Lewis, and the epigraph says that what you see and what you hear depends a great deal on where you are standing, and it also depends on what sort of person you are, which meshes perfectly with, obviously, because you thought of it, with the book. But then I thought what the Buddha said is, in seeing, only seeing, in hearing, only hearing. And I thought, that's the way I think I look at things. That's it. It's incredibly profound and incredibly simple, but it belies the very precept of your book, I think, unless you can argue that it doesn't.
Ooh, well. Big question there about what's going on in Buddhism and certain meditative practices that seem to put you a little bit more clearly in touch with what seeing really is, or what hearing really is, or sort of the pure essence of seeing or hearing. But I think what's going on in these cases is that we're just sort of turning down the volume on a lot of our other self-expectations and so on, and then something does come through rather clearly, and that's what you would expect from the mechanism that the book is portraying in many ways. So just concentrating on the breath means that all your precision is going on to the breath, for example, this weighting that plays such a big role, and that means that precision on other thoughts or distractions or your own image of yourself has to go down, because this weighting is a zero-sum game. If you up the precision on something, then you have to down it on everything else. So it's a good hack. A good self-hack is meditation. It's in there along with psychedelic drugs and so on.
Goes right to quantum mechanics. You know, if you know the acceleration, you don't know where it is. If you know where it is, you don't know the acceleration. Exactly. But you know, in Goff, in his book, which also has nice illustrations, he has one that's like, oh, well, he and Annie are not together. He has the illustration of the butterfly dreaming that he's a person, and the person dreaming that he's a butterfly.
There you go. That's I rather like the sound of that. I don't know quite what Philip's doing with that, but it sounds good.
Well, you certainly have given I mean, the book is really good because I love all these books, but as we talked earlier, this book is especially profound for people who are interested in learning more about living life and how best to do so, because it dumbs it down to make it seem like it's a do-it-yourself book, because that's not what it is. But it does suggest ways in which we can become better, and which we can become better with regard to the way we treat other people. So that was one of the things I took away from it that is different.
Thank you. I'm so pleased that you got that, because I was really keen to have that be one of the threads in the book.
Well, thanks so much, Andy. I really enjoyed our talk today and look forward to perhaps talking again.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.